Of the strengths of the academy, number one, and this is without a doubt in my opinion the strongest strength of the academy, is that the academy brings in the context of ideas and movers and shakers and thinkers and intellectuals and changes. The academy brings in the political, the cultural, the social context. You situate what's going on in the greater narrative so that you are better equipped to understand why what is happening is happening. That is almost absent from most madrasas. You study an author, you study another author, you study a third author, you barely know the years that they live and die, you have no idea of the societies they've been and raised in and the influences of the people around them. I remember, again, when I was applying to various programs, again, this is 2003, 2004 when I was applying, right? And I got accepted to a number of places, including Oxford, which I didn't go to, obviously, and Yahya Michaud was there, really nice guy. And he was happily showing me a new article he had just published. It was called A Mamluk Theologian's Response to Abyssinian Theology. And by Mamluk theologian, he meant Ibn Taymiyyah. And I didn't recognize Mamluk theologian meant Ibn Taymiyyah because even though I had studied Ibn Taymiyyah left and right, and I've read 10 books of his, we never cared to memorize that he's under the Mamluks. And that might have, and the invasion of the Mongol Empire might have had an impact. This is completely delinked. We're simply studying Hamawiyya, Tahawiyya, Tadmuriyya. We're studying it cover to cover, right? We're going over it line by line. But never once were we taught who Ibn Taymiyyah was as a person, what era he lived in, what conflicts happened that really might have shaped him, who were the Salatin, the Mamluks, what were the rise and fall. And Professor Yahya Michaud, great guy, intellectual mind, for him it's the most natural thing in the world. A Mamluk theologian's response to Ibn Sina's, Avicenna's, philosophy and whatnot. So my point being that the contextualization of what's happening, the study of history, the way that it's taught in the academy is almost absent from the madrasa. Frankly, and this is one of my biggest critiques, I hope this isn't taken the wrong way, but too often our history is hagiography and not history. Our history becomes mythology, eulogy, just like these stereotypical beatific tropes, this glorious, romanticized past that never actually existed. And we are taught a version, a skewed version of history that doesn't teach us facts. And the average Muslim, much less madrasa student, is dismally unaware of actual history. And I think this is a problem because our religion is divine, but our history is human. Our history is very human. And we've had a lot of ups, we've also had a lot of downs. And if we don't learn from the downs, we don't learn from the negatives, well then we're going to end up repeating them. So definitely the academy strongly emphasizes political science and history. Sometimes too much. For example, again, Ibn Taymiyyah is my area of expertise, so I studied a lot about him and how the West has viewed him. For example, there is a trend of Ibn Taymiyyah scholarship amongst Taymiyyists to psychoanalyze Ibn Taymiyyah and to say that one of the reasons why Ibn Taymiyyah was such a quote-unquote hardliner, again, that's how they view him, whether you view him like that or not is besides the point of my talk, but why he's such a hardliner is because he's absorbing the external political crises of his time, the Mongol invasion, the collapse of the Abbasid Empire. He's absorbing the trauma taking place externally, right? And then internalizing it theologically and demarcating sectarian lines very viciously because he can win that battle and he can't win the battle against the Mongol invasion. Now, one wonders, is that a little bit too much of a Freudian psychoanalysis? I don't know, but sometimes you do wonder, is it going too far? And perhaps they do. But still, as a beginner, in this talk, let me just say, I think for sure one of the best things I benefited from is that every time I study anything, I will also study the context around it. I'm going to study why it's taking place, what's going on simultaneously, what might have impacted it, because I think that is a part of understanding, the evolution of ideas and intellectual history. So this is definitely strength number one of the academy. The second strength of the academy and again this is clearly a strength as well, is that it emphasizes cross-cultural and multilingual references and contexts. And I remember again when I got accepted to Yale and I was told I have to learn French and German, and I'm like, but why? I'm doing a PhD on Ibn Taymiyyah and Islamic studies, and I have to learn one other Near Eastern language, choose Turkish or Farsi. And I really not argue, but I went back and, do I really have to do this? It's the law of our university, you have to. So I ended up learning French and German for reading. I have no idea how to speak them, but French, and took 2 years of Farsi, right? And again at the time, why? But then you start reading the articles written in these other languages, and you start reading books written about topics, history, whatnot, and then you realize that, oh wow, every thaqafa, every civilization has its output. And if you do go beyond your one culture, you open up new vistas, new ideas. And the academy forces you to humble yourself, that it's not just your thaqafa, it's not just your people, it's not just your language. There's lots to benefit. And you'd better realize that there's things written in other languages that you need to know and benefit from. And at the time, for those of you who know your Islamic theology, obviously the name of Van Es, comes up all the time in Theologie en Gesellschaft, which has just been translated, 6 volumes, right? When I was at Yale, it had not yet been translated. It's just been translated, so you can get it now by Brill, I think, or something, or whoever, $700 or whatever, it's just standard Brill prices. But at the time, it was still in German, and I was studying German, at Yale. And I was going over this 6-volume encyclopedia of Islamic Aqidah of the 2nd and 3rd century Hijrah. That's the title of the 6 volumes, right? Basically, Islamic society and theology and culture in the 100s and 200s of Hijrah. And I realized there is nothing like this in the Arabic language. Nothing. Look up any theologian and pages of encyclopedic references. Dirar ibn Amr, Wasil ibn Ata, Jaham ibn Safwan, pages and pages, and an entire encyclopedia, not just of theologians, but of thinkers, of scientists, of doctors. And everybody who knows the book knows its value. And again, you realize, well, if I don't learn German, I'm not going to have access to this knowledge. So one of the things that it does is that you begin to see the cross-cultural and the multilingual references, the source materials. We are taught in the academy that not only must you go back to the original, whether it's Ibn Taymiyyah, whether it's Suyuti, whether it's Ibn Hajar, whether it's As-Suhrawardi, but you also need to see how later people interpreted Ibn Taymiyyah, interpreted Suhrawardi, interpreted Al-Ghazali. And you see the evolution of interpretations which will then help you in your interpretation. And this to me was again mind-blowing, simple conceptually, but not practiced in our madrasa. We go straight back to Ibn Taymiyyah and we jump over 700 years of scholarship. What that does is you can misinterpret the author easily, or you can have novel reinterpretations, which frankly we're seeing in certain strands of Islam. I don't want to go there today, but it becomes easy to reinterpret that which might not be reinterpretable because you have cut off tradition. You've cut off turath. You've cut off scholarship as if it doesn't exist. And what the academy does, it forces you to read through all of the scholarship before you form your own mind. Know what others have said. Go ahead and agree and disagree. But see what the reception has been. See how he has been interpreted by other people so that you can then assess the merits of your own interpretation. And I think this is again very, very important to contextualize your own thoughts, to have the opportunity to engage in conversation with other intellectuals from other civilizations and other cultures whom you can agree or disagree with. And even in their mistakes, it'll help you formulate your own minds. Oh, I see why he misunderstood Al-Ghazali, why he formed this view. And when you engage with other minds, you become a better thinker. So I think this is definitely one of the strengths of the academy. As we're all aware in the academy, if you're in the academy, you cannot write even a graduate paper without referencing in the footnotes all of the major authors who have come before you. Authors that are your generation. Whereas in the madrasa, Doesn't matter what people have done of your generation, much less even previous generation. You can go straight back to the source, whoever the source is, and then reinterpret as you choose. So this is another strength, I would say. A third strength of the academy, which is also a potential negative, but is also a strength, is source criticism, historical analysis. Now this is a very contentious point. The madrasa teaches you to accept everything you have been taught. Now, as a Muslim, I say I have no problems accepting Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it's not just the Quran and Sunnah, it's the interpretation of your teachers of the Quran and Sunnah. You are not allowed to dare challenge their interpretation. Forget somebody, bigger than them. Now, in the academy, they welcome source criticism. They welcome a healthy dose of skepticism. They welcome you to challenge based upon obviously their paradigm of knowledge and usul, not the challenge out of nothing, but they're welcoming new ideas. And I'll give you a simple example again from my MA dissertation. So again, I spent 4 years studying this guy, right? Jahm ibn Safwan. I spent 4 years studying this guy. And one of the things I discovered, which ironically Richard M. Frank did not have, and it actually helps his dissertation, or his idea, by the way, is that Jahm ibn Safwan might have been studied from a particular person who was a student of John of Damascus, who was basically a Neoplatonist. I didn't know the term Neoplatonist at the time, by the way. But I discovered this, that he studied with so-and-so, he studied with Yohanna al-Dimashqi. John of Damascus was a very famous church father and is a Neoplatonist, right? So I discovered this, and I said, okay, so, and of course in the Medina phase, I'm like, this is an isnad that goes back to, a non-Muslim source. Clearly this guy is getting these ideas. I didn't have Neoplatonism, but I actually hit the nail on the head when I said, he's getting these ideas from John of Damascus. That's what I wrote, okay? Jahm ibn Safwan is getting his ideas from John of Damascus. This is in my MA, you can find it. In my munaqasha, in my, Viva, the examination at the end, right? One of the munaqishin, one of the examiners said, you wrote here that he got his ideas from John of Damascus. Man sabaqaka ila hadha? Who preceded you in saying this? I said, Shaykh, hada bahthi, I discovered it myself. He goes, ala kullin hada mushkil, you bring something new. It's problematic. Nobody before you said this. Like I was literally criticized for bringing a new statement and fact. Because the goal of that institute, frankly, and not just, I'm not criticizing that one institute, astaghfirullah. I'm saying you are expected to replicate and copy and paste. You're expected to have a level of reverence to those before. Forget challenging, you can't even bring something new without raising eyebrows. Who exactly are you to bring something new? Man anta aslan. They didn't say that, but that's the mindset, right? How can you bring what nobody before you? Was there Nawawi? Was there Ibn Taymiyyah? Did al-Dhahabi mention this? How are you finding this out? I said, he's not challenging my source. He's challenging me for bringing something new. Now, as you're all aware, the academy welcomes novel ideas. Maybe too much welcoming, but still, you are asked to bring something new to the table. And so the notion of being more skeptical, the notion of not trusting, and again, I have so many anecdotes of this regard that, of course, it raises epistemological issues because, again, much can be said here, but much of my thesis in Medina, I realized I'm basically accepting what a 7th, 8th, 9th Hijri century author might be writing about a 2nd century figure without questioning that person, right? So for example, Imam al-Dhahabi, we love and respect him. Great alim, great mu'arrikh, great scholar. But in the end of the day, what al-Dhahabi says about somebody 600 years before him should not be taken as a fact. It's not a contemporaneous. Where is his source? Where did he get it from? Also, again, with utmost love and respect to our great scholars, but when it comes to sectarian issues, we have to be a little bit careful what one sect says about another. There's an inherent bias. It's not an evil bias, it's an inherent bias, right? So we just have to be a little bit more, and we saw this, Ra'y al-Ayn, I saw this multiple times in other research that I've done. It's human nature. When you want to paint an enemy in a negative way, you're going to mention the most, not positive facts, and not necessarily say an untruth, but not necessarily give the full picture as well. And that's human nature. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to criticize. It is what it is, right? And the academy forces you to take these things into account and forces you to rethink through, why are you accepting this as a fact when it might be coming out of a misunderstanding, whatever it might be. So the point being that, the academy does ask you to be a little bit more skeptical. Now, of course, in that skepticism is positive and negative.
فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب وتخفي الذنب عن خلقي وتأبى في الهوى قربي فتب مما جنيت عسى تعود إلى رضا الرب تعود إلى رضا الرب